Welcome back to Best Practices for Alyvix. So far in our series, we look at how to create a new test case from scratch and how to mark up the components on a screen grab. And last time, we looked at the designer panel with its component tree and the whole range of options that can be assigned to those components. This time, we'll move to the selector panel, which does 5 things. It links the component tree to named steps that can be scripted. It links the application interface to monitoring. It helps you manage individual steps. It helps you manage large numbers of steps. And it lets you quickly script or run just one step. Let's start with the first one. Once we've marked up a screen grab and completed the component tree, we want it to become one step in our interactive application task. Giving a step a poorly chosen name makes it harder to understand an earlier test case that you need to update. A good name lets us quickly understand what the step does with just a glance. It also helps us easily reuse steps without having to duplicate them. After using the Add button to create the step components, Alyvix assigns the step a default name and gives it a row in the selector panel. Each row corresponds to a step or test case object, and selecting a new one will show both its components in the designer panel and its screen grab in the scripting panel tab. Just as when programming you would give a variable a meaningful name, step names should make it easy to understand what a step does and the interface state. So try to follow a standardized naming scheme with a common format, like camel case, and include a state. Second, Alyvix supports monitoring at the step level. Unlike a monitoring script that measures a single quantity like CPU load and then stops, Alyvix can measure elapsed time for every step over an entire task sequence. And each of these steps might have different monitoring thresholds, like a warning at 5 seconds for a particular web page load versus 10 seconds for a complex database query. So assign appropriate thresholds to each step, with values that make sense for that step. You can also tell Alyvix what to do if a script fails or whether a step even needs to be measured at all. And so Selector is the link between the app interface and Alyvix Designer on one hand and the monitoring system on the other. The timeout value gives Alyvix an absolute limit to how long it should wait to match the steps componentry before giving up. The monitoring system is notified when the test case finishes properly or when the timeout value is exceeded. The break flag indicates whether a test case should continue or not if this particular step fails to match within the timeout period. The measure flag tells Alyvix whether or not it should calculate and then report the time needed, from when the previous step matches to when the current step matches. The warning and critical values are similar to the timeout value, except they correspond to specific values sent to the monitoring system. Monitoring measurements are reported at the end of the test case, whether or not every test case step eventually succeeds, unless a timeout was exceeded, in which case subsequent steps won't be run and thus won't have measurements. The third use of Selector is tools that help manage the individual steps as you create or edit them. In addition to the Add button we've used before, there's also the Grab button that lets you substitute the existing screen grab with what's currently shown on screen, the Duplicate button, which just makes a copy of the currently selected row right down to adding copy to the name, and the Remove button, which deletes the currently selected row. Another management parameter is the screen resolution and window scaling factor associated with a particular screen grab. When Alyvix grabs the screen, it notes the resolution and scaling as part of the test case object. This is important because you can't reliably match graphics captured at one resolution and scaling with the graphics currently on screen at a different resolution and scaling. So be sure to create a test case with Alyvix Editor on the machine the monitoring checks will run on. Let's look at an example using a step from our test case recorded at 1920 by 1080 and 100% scaling. Usually you'll come across different resolutions and scaling factors when you edit a test case on a remote machine, for example through RDP. But for this video, let's see what happens when we change the resolution on the same machine. To do that, we'll have to exit and re-enter Alyvix Editor. In Selector, you'll see the resolution has changed and that no steps are shown because all the previous steps are at 1920 by 1080. So let's change it back to 1920. Since we now have multiple resolutions and our steps don't match the current resolution, we don't see the Quick Actions, the Monitor tab, or the Designer panel. The available resolutions are visible in the Filter dropdown at the bottom left. To add the Access Ready step in our new resolution, we'll have to grab the screen and mark up the interface again. Once we're back, it doesn't look like anything has changed. The steps are still at 1920. But if we change the resolution filter to all, Selector will prefer to show the steps at the current resolution if they exist. Our step now has the Monitor tab again, and it's inherited all of the monitoring values. At the top left of Selector is a blue tab with a plus sign to its right. The blue tab represents the .alyvix file you're currently editing. Using the plus sign, you can view the test case objects within a different Alyvix file. Switching to a new tab doesn't load the file so you can edit it, but instead treats it as a library where you can copy test case objects into your current test case. So if you find yourself repeating the same markup or using the same interface over and over, save time by adding those steps to a library file. Below the list are the Select All and Deselect All buttons, which let you duplicate or remove more than one test case object at a time. You can also use the standard Windows Control-click and Shift-click to select multiple rows. The transaction group is a user-definable string that allows you to tag a test case object like login for all credential-based steps or load page for all browser steps. You can then sort based on tags to either see all steps of a similar type together or copy or remove them en masse. Finally, to the left of the rows names are the quick buttons for scripting and running a specific step. These let you add that test case object to the script above or run it immediately as a single step. If you're stepping through the interface in the natural sequence, you'll probably want to just add this step to the bottom of the script. Suppose instead you're changing an existing script to update it because the application has changed or to fix a mistake. Then use the drag button to put it in exactly the spot you want. Finally, use the play button to immediately run just this step on whatever interface is currently visible on screen. But we'll look in detail at scripting and running test cases in the next best practices video. Here's a repeat of the best practices from today. See you soon for part 5 in this series.